beautiful view.
Please
Mac
welcome.
wrote that poem, right, Ken? Mac wrote that poem?
Mac wrote the poem,
Yeah.
yes.
Let me introduce you first, not that everybody doesn't already know you, but please welcome Bill Hayes and Susan Seaforth Hayes. Mr. Peter Reckell and Kristian Alfonso.
Hi, folks.
So we have some of TV's great romances seated here. And it's interesting how, looking at the clip, we saw a lot of kissing going on. But standards and practices have really changed over the years, Ken. So why don't you start this conversation off with how things used to be and how far they've come? And
We used to trade dams for hells. You get 3 dams and 1 hell, and it was ridiculous. There wasn't 1 foot on the bed, 1 foot on the mattress. And then the FCC had some cutbacks. Wonderful for us.
Yeah.
And they gave the responsibility to the producer in the control room to try to keep things within the parameters of good taste. And then we started to have a lot of fun. And then that little thing started popping up in the corner of the screen that said PG-14, and a little more care had to go into it, but the early days were silly. I mean, it really was silly. You couldn't, not to take the deity's name in vain, but it really was absurd to trade oh damn for oh hell. You remember this.
Oh, yes.
So then the good times started rolling, and I give it to Billy and Susan because they were having more than just a little peck.
Funny you should mention that. The old days, the new days, the shooting schedule is incredibly quick, and the performers have to be excellent just first thing in the morning. But we used to have a first thing in the morning where we didn't have to be quite so ready, camera ready. And I can remember after Billy and I married, when we were sharing a dressing room, we'd get there at 6 o'clock in the morning and we'd do our dry block, and then we might run lines and retire to our room and make love, take a shower, get into makeup, do our first camera block. You know, that it was a longer day, but it was a lovely day. And I think the audience sensed that there was that sort of undercurrent of joyful sexuality that is, after all, one of the main reasons people tune in to watch soap opera is the joy of romance and the fact that there can be fulfillment. And because you married Bill and I, it was legal. So we're an old super couple, but we're still at it, and
yeah.
And as you see, Ken, to whom I owe everything, and the current producer and the head writers, of course, we are very, very grateful, and grateful that romance has gone on with such shining actors as our children on the show, whom we think of as our children, whom we adore, and who are the beauties of all time, and take it away, sexuality plus.
Can't even come close. I'm so...
I would like to say something.
yes, please.
It's okay for Ken to say that his parents did a fabulous job, but I would like to add my voice to that. They really knew what they were doing. They started with family, and we are a family. The group that does Days of Our Lives is a family, and Susan and I have traveled a lot in the last 20, 30 years, and all over the country. Everywhere we go, we are a member of their family in their home also. It's a bigger family than we know. I'd just like to say what a what geniuses Ted and Betty must have been to create this idea. And romance, Susan and I had, for those of you who weren't there, in the 70s, the most wonderful romantic decade. It was just thrilling. Patricia Barry was here tonight. She was my wife, you know. That was Addie, and
My mother, your wife.
Addie. You asked for what the relationship is between the ladies. Well, for those of you who aren't aware, Addie is the mother of Julie and also the mother of Hope. And I married both of them. I mean, both Addie and Julie, and what a thrill to be a part of this. Wow.
Well, I can see why the two of you ended up on the cover of Time magazine.
Yeah.
And
Pure luck. They
remember that?
photographed every soap on television. Mm-hmm. They interviewed every head writer on television, and I knew from the writer of the story, said after, your head writer is nuts. We've got to use your show. And then they decided, then current events came up, and all the current events were very important. Assassinations, elections, you know, the economy, whatever. Mm-hmm. And then finally a soft news week came up, and it was Days of Our Lives was the hottest show on television. And it's never been on the cover of Time. I mean, there's never been another soap on the cover of a news magazine since. So we just happened to be riding the crest of what was that whole golden time for soap, and particularly for Days.
Well, you were hot, and you still are hot. And and speaking of hot, we have another great romance. Well, you've had a couple of weddings, actually. And I think that the wedding in London comes to mind because there was no other wedding to rival that. Maybe Charles and Diana, but we all know how that turned out. And you know, you've had your challenges too. Why don't you talk about the wedding in London, Kristen?
Okay. The wedding, first of all, I just have to say, to be a part of the show, I mean, Missy, Mary Beth, it's true. I know that a lot of people say that their shows, you know, it's a family. This truly is like a family. And it's like you're leaving one home to come to another home. So Ken, thank you. Okay, London. It was amazing. It was the most beautiful. It was a very expensive wedding. I remember Richard Bloor, who was our costume designer at the time, Lee Smith was our costume designer at the time, had flown to Paris to pick up the tulle for my dress. I recall it costing around $30,000. Mm-hmm. And that was 20-something years ago.
That included his lunch at the Ritz, I'm sure, too.
Possibly.
And every bride at that time, they wanted to look like Kristian. I mean, it was a phenomenon.
The most beautiful. I mean, it was an absolutely beautiful, beautiful dress. The storyline was every woman's dream. I mean, it was romance and the love that they had for each other and the connection that they had. You know, the girl from the private schools, the rich side of the tracks, and then you had Beau, the rebel, every girl's dream. Mm-hmm. And Hope she was a child. I mean, one of the clips brought back memories because I was thinking, oh my God, that was the first day that I started when Beau was putting, do you remember that? Was putting the motorcycle helmet on Hope. And I was like, oh my God, that's my red jacket that I bought in New York. You know, I have so many fond memories. It was beautiful. And we shot the wedding ceremony here, and then we did all of the exteriors in London. And I remember when we arrived in London, Lee was panicking because we were going to start shooting the next morning, but none of our wardrobe had arrived. So he shot to Harrods and started buying and costuming us. Yeah.
And you've had great adventures all over the world. Peter, why don't you talk about your adventure in New Orleans? That's a memorable one.
Yeah, I was asked.
That was a fun one.
We've
had so many great stories.
I've asked that question several times tonight. What comes to mind? What's the first thing that comes to mind about the most memorable moments? And New Orleans is right there on top. A lot because of the storyline and what we were doing. A lot because that was the first time we had been out of the studio, and we're, a couple kids with our heads in the sand, just flying by the seat.
My head was in the sand. You knew what you were doing.
Well, the best part about it was Frances was with us and sort of pulling us along. And that's where Fancy Face came from, and just. It was spur of the moment, kind of. We were doing 100 and how many pages a day, and just flying and having a great time. And thank you for that storyline. It was amazing.
The turnout at the airport when you landed in New Orleans, it was totally unexpected. There were 20,000 people there, and the fire marshals wanted to shut the place down. And there's hundreds of women screaming, "Bo, I want to have your baby." But it really was. It was such a dose of reality.
I remember we were waiting to get off the plane, and as you spoke of, Frances was with us, and Shelley Curtis, one of our other producers, and I was like, "Oh my God, Petey! They're playing the Bo and Hope theme song."
Yeah, she called me Petey back then.
Oh, sorry. I said they're playing our theme song on the plane. How weird is that? But it wasn't. It was this huge band. When they allowed you to go to the gates, there was this huge 8-piece band playing.
High school band, like. Not 8 piece.
It was unbelievable, and I just remember Peter grabbing me, and my feet never touched the ground the whole way out, and he just kind of threw me into and he was trying to protect Frances as well. It was just astonishing. I mean, it was just unbelievable.
Well, Kristian, as you mentioned earlier, Bo Brady is one of TV's great heartthrobs, and actually, Bo could be in our next segment because that is about action, adventure, and heroes. And I have to keep things moving along.
John,
here.
there was a kerfuffle backstage about that because Peter said, "Wait a minute, I'm in this, and I'm not in the next group," and there was a little bartering going on. But
well, then maybe you should stick around.
But this is so appropriate. You have the two greatest love stories in Days of Our Lives sitting in front of you.
I agree.
One parting shot before we get into action and adventure and more.
How can we top your action and adventure?
Yeah, I think you two could be in that one too.
Longevity counts. The thing is, I've been on and off.
You guys have nothing.
I've been on and off the show many times, and I know whenever I don't mean on and off the show, I mean really off the show, goodbye. I had a beautiful gift from Ken, goodbye, this is your last show. And since we're not under contract anymore, and the cake, and Billy got a cake when they killed him,
and I
we thought
died.
He was dead, and he got a watch from Ken, and we're all, I don't know anybody that has ever been on Days of Our Lives and left it, whether they were mad at the writers or had another job to go to, that didn't walk off that show with a sense of, my God, I've lost the sweetest job I ever had. I'd love to be there to this day. I know people feel that way. I feel that way. Every time I get a script, it's, oh, thank God I get to do another segment, because we all love it so. And the romance is our romance with Days. The actor's romance with Days goes on, and I think the audience sees it. And we love you very much for coming here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Well, and from that, we are going to move on to our next clip, and that is action, adventure, and heroes. And I just hope that it's not, topped by this segment. There was a lot of action up here, too. So let's roll that next clip.